So this morning we just wanted to talk for a few minutes about, with it being Fentanyl Awareness Day, look at some of our fentanyl numbers, and then the lab folks here are actually here to be able to talk more specifically about the drug. But, as you know, with the Esper Perpetua program and emphasis, we've got troopers who are on the road looking for those drugs. And we've seen about a 10% roughly decrease in fentanyl on the road this year of seizures than we did this time last year, so it's a real positive thing. We've got about 274 cases, active cases working where the lab's been able to do analysis of the fentanyl actually being involved in that case, which again is a decrease from last year. Our troopers on the road, sure thing. Our troopers on the road, Sergeant Sproat and the other DHE, the Domestic Highway Intervention troopers, they have what they call a true narc. So when they're out on the road and they find what they believe to be fentanyl, they can do a presumptive positive or they can do a test on it, but that's not quite good enough to be able to go to court. So of course, it's enough to be able to perform the arrest, perform the seizure of the drugs, book the person in the jail, and then they send the drug here for analysis. So Sergeant Sproat, correct me if I'm wrong, the true narc takes about 2 to 3 minutes to be able to actually do a test.
We've got one in every district.
We have one in every district. We have one for every district. That's a perpetual member. And then we have 8 additional ones for our investigative group, for our detectives.
Yeah, so we've got 18 statewide.
Are they $25,000 officers?
They are.
Yeah, with inflation, we throw them over 30 now. But they are between 25 and 30,000. We have 18 across the state, and his folks have a lot of them, and our investigators and detectives have the others. So they're able to read a lot of these, and get a lot of the drugs and get presumptive positives enough to be able to continue with the case. This is what it looks like. You haven't seen one before.
This thing's $25,000.
It is.
Yes,
it
is.
is.
Boy, that's a lot of money per pound.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. Then all you do is take off this piece here, and then you shoot it with the laser, and it comes back with a reading what substance it is.
Very cool.
It's a pretty handy little device, but we try to keep those distributed throughout the state in those high emphasis areas where we're trying to target more than the others, of course, because of the cost. But 2 to 3 minutes, the troopers should be able to know a better idea of what they have to be able to continue the case.
Do any cities have them? Or
They do.
Cities and the counties, some of the bigger counties?
Yeah, some of the bigger ones have more than others. We're pretty fortunate with the amount that we have.
Yeah, not only does that give us the presumptive positive on fentanyl or any other drug that we're trying to detect, but it also helps with the safety of the trooper out there, so he or she isn't handling the substance more than
How much powdered fentanyl do you find versus pills?
We're seeing a lot more powder than we used to, but it's still primarily pills. I would say, 2 years ago it was probably 95% pills. I would say now it's probably more, maybe 75 to 80% pills.
When we were at the federal prosecutor's office, do we, because we all know that there's what 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10 have a lethal dose for a first-time user. Does that just gives you a positive?
Correct.
And then it comes to the lab, and then you can determine what percent of pure fentanyl it is. Is that correct?
We actually don't in this laboratory do quantitation on the fentanyl. We're just identifying what's in there. It can be a mixture of things.
Oh, yeah. Almost always is.
It can be a mixture of different types of fentanyl also. But we do not determine at this time what percentage it is. There are not many laboratories doing that. There's a safety risk of having to homogenize the sample and grind it all up to try to do a percentage.
So we have, a lot of times we see them in the form that we have this morning here.
Go away. You're very cute.
I've just seen in pictures before, and so often, wonderful, so often looks just like normal medications we can take, ibuprofen or anything else.
you go to the DEA website, and in fact, and when they first started making pills, now they're looking just as good as oxycodone, Adderall. They look, I mean, those pill mills that they've got down in Mexico are very, very.
The counterfeit pills, I mean, it's hard to tell the difference between over-the-counter medication, prescription medication, and these counterfeits. So she has some right here, some pill form. She can take a look at.
So that is what we used to see almost all of the time. For statewide for our lab now, it's down to about 45% is tablets. It's a lot more powder now, but that used to be almost all of our cases.
Hardcore users grind this up.
For what we see most often coming in for paraphernalia is being smoked.
Yeah. I just want to show off these very nice gloves. Yeah, that's right.
So like I said, that's what we saw most often, and they would have the majority of the tablets, the active ingredient we'd see is acetaminophen, so Tylenol, and with a little bit of fentanyl in it. But these have been going away.
So unless you have any questions about the precursor to the lab, one guy just will handle the lab folks. The real smart folks can talk about the lab piece itself.
Good.
So when a sample does come in here, what we're seeing most often now is a solid form. So like powdery, white, off-white solid is now on the rise. That is the more common form that we're getting in this laboratory. Like they commented about cases down, I think you said 10% for ISP overall. Our lab system, which the stats are all on our website, the current stats, statewide we're down about 30% for fentanyl. For the Meridian lab alone, we're about 50% down from the same time last year. So we have seen a sharp drop in the fentanyl analysis that we're getting in. Granted, that's what's submitted to us. We can't see what's out there, only what is submitted to the laboratory. But we start off by first taking a weight. I've already weighed this sample, so this is about 1 gram, so about a quarter of what is trafficking for fentanyl. And then we start with presumptive test. If you saw the TrueNarc, that's an instrument used for presumptive testing, just to tell us what might be in the sample. We actually use a chemical test. So I use this clear reagent. Just a small amount of sample. And we're just looking for color change. So this one takes just a second. You'll see it's turning an orange color. And that's a presumptive positive for fentanyl. So I don't get back the reading on an instrument that says it's fentanyl, just I'm looking for that positive orange.
And that'll hold up in court.
That for to go along with our confirmatory testing. Yeah, this is just a small portion, so I know how to proceed from there. I can't use this for any confirmation, sort of like the TrueNarc. That can't be used for testimony in court or for actual confirmation in court. So I then take another portion of this. I've already ran this yesterday, so we'll go look at the instrument in the other room in a second, but it's kind of noisy in there, so I'll explain what it does a little bit here. That's where our expensive instrumentation comes in. So we analyze this on an instrument called the GCMS, or gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. I think they're, as you said, 25, 30. We're looking now, I think, about $130,000, $140,000 for the instrument.
Is this the only one we have in the state?
No, we have 3 of them here, and our other 2 labs each have 2, and then we have 1 for the Jerome laboratory that has been ordered. So we have them across the state, and we use it for almost all of our controlled substance confirmations. So it's actually 2 instruments. The first portion, the gas chromatograph, separates. The important part about this instrument is it separates out mixture. So as you know, the drugs we're getting in aren't pure, and so this actually separates out the components so that we can identify what's in it. And then that goes into the mass spectrometer, the mass spec, and it breaks it down into fragments, and we can actually identify that sample run on the instrument, you can see the kind of information that we get.
You, how often do you find carb fentanyl?
Honestly, only once every couple months, but we have had carb fentanyl in Idaho. It's just not real common. The other thing that we have to watch out for, as I mentioned, with fentanyl has been decreasing, but something tends to fill that gap. So one thing that we've changed our methods a little bit for now is a new class of opiates called nitazines. And it's a new emerging drug, and there's a whole bunch of them just like there are fentanyls. So we are now monitoring. We've had just a few of them, but it could be something that we start seeing in the tablets when the fentanyl supply decreases. So we're always watching for those new emerging drugs, so that we're not missing them during our analysis.
Could you stand next to her because your monitor's over there? So they can
Yep.
grab
All right.
We'll go see do.
There you go.
So that's the GCMS. The samples are in those little vials on the top. That's what I prepare in the laboratory. It's injected, and this is the GC, the other that causes the separation, and that second portion over there is what breaks it down into fragments. So what we get is, this is from the GC telling us, so every peak is a component of the sample that's coming out. This peak here is fentanyl. The majority of that sample that you saw in there is fentanyl. This is mannitol, a cut of sugar that's in there, and this is actually a precursor for making fentanyl. But I get this information and I compare it against known standards of drugs. So I buy commercially purchased standard of fentanyl that I can identify with.
Then you calibrate.
So yeah, I have to have a known standard to compare.
Yeah.
I can't just, that kind of looks like what fentanyl would look like. So we're looking at both the time it comes out and those fragments and compare it to our standard of fentanyl, and all of the fragments are the same, and the fentanyl peak came out at the same time of 13.21 minutes.
These components do you have an idea of what laboratory in either China or Mexico these are manufactured in?
From this information, I don't. The DEA is the only agency that I know of that runs signature programs where they actually look at the impurities in these samples and try to tie them back to synthesis. It's a little harder for a synthetic product like fentanyl because your heroin, cocaine, it can be tied back to a growing region because it comes from a plant. Fentanyl is totally synthetic, so it can be tied back to a synthesis route, what chemicals they made it from, but not always where it was made. But not from the testing we do. We're just looking at qualitative data. Does the sample contain fentanyl? Is it one of the fentanyl analogs? Is it a different drug? I just tested one yesterday trying to prepare for, so I would have something, and I had a nice, I think it was about 16 grams, white powder, looked pretty. There was nothing in it at all. So we don't always know until we've tested it, even if it contains any drug.
So, what percentage, when you go to arrest and conviction, what's your percentage of conviction predicated on this lab work?
Well, just strictly on this, once this lab work tells us it's actually fentanyl, that's usually a pretty done deal.
What's in the mandatory minimum? What's the level of the mandatory minimum?
For weight of powder or tablets?
Yeah, what do we finally, it was the second year that legislation went through.
So
I signed it, but I can't remember.
So for actual powdered samples, there's a 4 gram level, a 14, and a 28, I believe, are the 3 levels.
28 grams is enough
1
to kill
ounce.
a lot. If it's pure fentanyl.
Yes. Luckily, what we see is not normally pure fentanyl. We'd have to have probably a lot more precautions in the laboratory if we were dealing with pure powdered fentanyl. And then there are the corresponding levels. The tablets are separate from. So we count a lot of tablets. There are little trays in there for shaking out and counting the tablets to prove a tablet count report also. A weight's kind kind of easier to prove because I can take one single weight as opposed to.
What's the variation in the pills you generally, when these guys do an arrest, what's the variation when it gets in here?
For the content of
Yeah,
them,
yeah.
they're vastly different. Some of them we just never know when we're running. It is all qualitative, but depending on what we put in for a sample, you can kind of see if this thing is low concentrations. We get some that we can find almost no fentanyl in. There are some with no fentanyl, and then there's stuff like this that is almost all fentanyl.
How often do you have to find no fentanyl?
I would say probably, if I had to estimate, maybe less than 10% of the tablets, but we do, for a while, we were getting some that contained, I believe it was probably dextromethorphan, but methorphan, which is a poisonous acetaminophen. So they were selling pretty much cold tablets as fentanyl tablets.
What's the price on the street now?
We're still, I believe, about the $20, and Sprott would know that a little bit better. Hey, Sergeant Sprott.
He's still there, yeah.
Kurt, we're looking at the cost of a pill on the street is still about $20.
Here it's
for
about,
fentanyl.
in this area it's about $10 to $15.
And it costs them 30 cents to make them?
Yeah, it's not, the profit margin's huge.
Well, and I know in some of the tribal lands in Montana,
Yes.
prices up as high as $80.
Yes. Yeah, so you take pills from like Washington and you take them over to Indian Reservation of Montana, talk about huge profit margin, and I mean that's part of the reason these people are doing it, but unfortunately people are losing their lives because of it. So
Well, it's one of those whack-a-mole deals. We get our arms around fentanyl, but almost everybody recognizes fentanyl as one of the biggest problems we have. Emily was our lead on fentanyl takes all in our media, and the last numbers we saw, because when we first ran that, the fentanyl takes all ads, then we went back and did a lot of surveys, and we were really trying to get to as young men. That was and so they changed their messaging, but it's been recognized multiple times as one of the best. So we get the awareness up, and then we got to stop it at the border, catch it here, get a conviction. Thank you, and make people aware. So, and then. We can catch these people early enough, we can treat it. You talk to people in corrections, there's some people that just their addiction level gets so high, it just doesn't. But we're still doing some intervention before they even get into the court system, particularly as we can find these first-time arrests. I think Bannock County, was it Bannock or Bonneville County? Bonneville County's got a really good interdiction. Where if an officer finds a first-time user, they'll have an interdiction program, and it's run. Doesn't the funding come? No, it comes through corrections. The interdiction money comes through corrections. But our first Esto Perpetua meeting in Coeur d'Alene, I think you were with me. The chief of police, Coeur d'Alene, was the one said, and we got North Idaho. There's a lot of traffic, and you talk to the state troopers. There's a lot of traffic that goes from Spokane over across. You look at the map of where all the fentanyl comes from. Every time I'm down at the border with DPS from Texas, it's interesting. I said, so if I'm a bad guy and I want to send drugs to Indiana, why would I go through Idaho? And he smiled at me and says, because I got a lot of troopers on the ground in Texas, and they want to get out of Texas as fast as they can. And so they come up through California and Nevada, and of course I think our route in here is mainly through Nevada and Utah and California. But it's good that we're making people aware of it. It's good that we've got the tools to
Well, we're always trying to up our game. We always try to figure out what the traffickers and what some people who are mules to haul the stuff around, what their tactics, techniques, and procedures are. So, for instance, we're right now in the process of training our dogs to with smell and sniff out. Right now we have the other drugs, but we haven't had fentanyl dogs yet. We will very, very near.
What do the states do where they legalize marijuana? What do they do with their dogs?
Well, it's been, unfortunately, that's sometimes it's been a $1 million question. What do they do with the dogs? Some states have had a pause on the use of their dogs. They're just marijuana focused. Some have been in the retrain. Some have taken care of the dogs.
But I mean, in court, you could say it was I had legal marijuana, and we had a Supreme Court case just in the last 6 or 8 months where a dog climbed up on a car, and the court said that's an illegal search and seizure. So we're having to retrain our dogs.
And that's a real challenge because you and I can converse about what the right thing to do, wrong thing to do. It's real hard to talk to the dog, and so it's those handlers have really got to be on the A game all the time to make sure the dog doesn't just naturally do something that a dog does. And now all of a sudden it's still not important.
I'm just trying to keep my dog off the couch.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So you have another machine?
Yeah.
Oh boy,
Let's go this way.
we're getting bigger and bigger machines. Right.
Sorry. Yeah, no. Yeah. So this is what we, over in the other side of the lab, we test about 14,000 drug cases a year, and a lot of those are methamphetamine and fentanyl. So once we get over in this area, what we're looking at is more of the advanced in the process. So we're looking at suspected overdose deaths. So that's the stuff on the street, may or may not kill. Now we're looking at what did kill. So we work with the coroners, and they give us blood samples from deceased individuals that they suspect might have died of a fentanyl overdose or some other kind of emerging drug overdose. They'll give us the blood, we bring it in here, and this is all part of your Esto Perpetua initiative as well, that this instrument will then run that within 48 hours of the coroner submitting it to us, sometimes even faster. So we can give them almost immediate data on what was in that sample and was it a contributing factor to the death of that individual. Once we get that data, we then do a confirmatory on that. We send it to our toxicology lab either in Coeur d'Alene or in Pocatello, and we will do the complete analysis and we'll get quantitative values. You were asking about quantitative values. The doctors will then be able to look at those quantitative values and determine cause and manner of death. So this gives us a screen, a really quick screen.
So do they amend the death certificate, or is it still pending when this is all
Still pending, but it gives them some decision-making ability. So it lets them know, do we need to be doing more investigation of this? Are we comfortable doing an autopsy on this, or is this body not needing to be autopsied because of a drug overdose? So they can make some early determinations that helps the family to get the body released to the family, to help proceed with all the insurance benefits and those kind of things that they need to proceed with burial and that. So it's really helpful to the medical examiner, the forensic pathologists, and to the coroners in our state to be able to make those determinations.
Well, don't we only have two coroners with all the necessary here in Ada County and Bannock County or Bonneville County, and then in the north you go to Spokane.
Right. So it's really important for us to help them to make these determinations really quickly, so that, and then we also put that information, that data, we're putting all the chemistry data, all those 14,000 cases, we're giving that data to the HIDA, we're giving that to the health and welfare, we're giving that to everybody to help with interdiction and treatment and all of the other things, as well as enforcement, obviously, with the court system.
And for those that don't know, HIDA's our joint program with the federal prosecutors, where we've got one in Pocatello, in Ada and Canyon County, and we're getting ready to put one, and we're actually putting a new prosecutor up in Shoshone County, to where, and that was a big deal to have a hide, because the feds help us a lot, and if you're convicted, you go to federal penitentiary, and Donald J. Trump pays for them and not Brad Little.
That's exactly correct. So the really nice thing about this instrument is it allows us quick analysis, and then we put it into what we call OD map, or overdose map. So there's a literal map of Idaho that shows where all these cases came from, what the suspected overdoses were, so we can kind of create a hot map of where we're seeing these cases, and then we can shift those resources where in Idaho that we're seeing the biggest problems. So we partner with the coroners on this. It's a fantastic program. Idaho State Police won the validation of the year for this instrument.
Oh, excellent.
Putting it into use in Idaho.
Did you get a ribbon? Or?
We got a big plaque. It was really great. And then the other great thing that's come out of this is we are now internationally known for putting this instrument into practice right here in Idaho. And this is part of the Estor Perpetua initiative that we're presenting on it internationally next week to an audience of scientists around the world to talk to them about how we implemented this as part of
You're
our
not going to send Mike on a trip, are you?
No. It'll be virtual. All virtual.
We have
But,
about 5 minutes. Is there any questions for any of the media here?
Yeah, Governor, I mean, the rule embarrassment from Channel 6. Big drug bust recently that we have seen documentation of here today, in fact. But you and I have been around for a long, long time, and we've seen busts come and go over the years, and always the drugs come back. What gives you confidence that perhaps things are different now?
Well, I think the awareness from Estor Perpetua, we've got good data that you know, when fentanyl first started, you know, a lot of people, the most heartbreaking thing is when a parent says they have a child that maybe had a sports injury and maybe was taken pain medicine, and then the pain medicine ran out and bought some what they thought was oxycodone on the street, and they died of an overdose. There was I think 1 or 2 examples in the Lewiston area. I knew one of the families, and we're kind of over that because of the awareness that if you buy one of these pills that we just had in the lab on the street, the awareness of it, that like the conversation's going, there's such a huge profit margin in this industry that new drugs are going to come up. I've asked the question multiple times, why would anybody sell a product that kills over half of your customers? And the answer is over and over that the other ones get addicted and then they'll be repeat customers. It's the most cruel, inhumane, insidious industry there is, and the connection between being produced in China, going to Mexico, and being fabricated into these pills. And so we're trying to stop it at the border. We're trying to determine, that's why our state troopers have been down there multiple times, how to identify the people that are bringing it up. You got to have all this fancy lab equipment to detect it. You obviously got to prosecute, and then you've got to treat these people. But all the time you got to do public awareness. It is kind of it's not like we're going to shut this lab down because we're going to get rid of this problem. It's the fact that we want to be one of the best at that early detection and send the message to bad guys. And you can talk to the federal prosecutors because of our laws in Idaho versus the laws. That was one of the things that Estor Perpetua, they'll intercept conversations from drug dealers, say, don't cross this Washington state line and go into Idaho, because we've got incredible law enforcement and our laws are such that are mandatory minimums, that it's a much higher risk than it is. And of course, Oregon has been just, that was one of the places. I remember the Fruitland chief of police parked at the bridge at Fruitland because they had decriminalized drugs over there, and the Oregon police were saying, we can't arrest this guy, but he's in bad shape. When he comes across, you need to arrest him. So the poor property taxpayers in Washington and Payette County are paying to incarcerate them.
You know, these folks in uniform here put their lives on the line, obviously, to make busts like we saw recently, and it's a huge part of the issue. But do you think that the balance is such that you're putting enough money into stopping the demand? Because as long as there's demand, there will always be drugs, correct? So if that's the case, then do we need to put more into addiction prevention?
Emily, didn't we get we increased our funding into fentanyl awareness. This year was $500,000. Yeah. So the legislature agreed with us.
Is that enough?
Probably not. But I mean, but we know we're moving the needle. You know, there's some people that just, and of course, almost all of it, you don't see it on the Channel 6 news, but all this communication is through social media, because the fact is, the people that are the problem don't spend their evenings with their shoes off watching the local news. No offense to the local news.
What's the name of this?
This is the Randox. It's a Randox multi-stat instrument.
And what are you seeing overdose deaths related to fentanyl going down, or what are you seeing?
So we leave it to the forensic pathologists who are for Erie County or somewhere else in our state. The forensic pathologist is the doctor that makes the determination of the cause and manner of death. So we're giving them information to be able to make that decision on. What I can tell you is that we've tested about 150, 160 samples at this point from Idaho suspected overdose deaths, and over 50% of those consistently have fentanyl in the samples. So they're usually a mixture, might be methamphetamine and fentanyl and something else, but over 50% consistently have fentanyl in those samples.
When did you start using it for that? Sorry.
We've used this instrument for about a year, and we're about 2 years into this program, getting the instrument up and running. We're going to continue this research and this study and continue to expand it to all counties in Idaho, we hope.
I would predict that we're going to see statistically an increase, but it's because of the new legislation that passed, particularly for some of these small coroners that just weren't doing it. In Ada County, it's because they've got a very good lab. The legislation that was passed this session that I signed basically requires a lot of these coroners that weren't doing the analysis to send those samples either here to Boise or to, I can't remember if it's Banning or Bonneville or up there. So there's going to be more. There's going to be more identification of this than there's been before as a result of this. I don't know how you normalize that statistic. But it's still the right thing to do, because we absolutely need to know where the problem is, so these guys can focus their efforts, and we can take our media efforts and focus it on what we think is the target audience for these bad guys.
Anecdotally, we're seeing a lot of evidence that people that they thought were dying of other things, natural causes and things, and then when those samples are sent in here or elsewhere to be tested, we're actually finding out that there are overdoses from fentanyl and other emerging drugs.
Is this the worst thing you've seen in terms of drug advancements in decades?
I wouldn't couch it in those terms. I would say it's definitely one of the fastest emerging things that we've seen, and it's definitely killing individuals in Idaho. It's killing people all over the country. So yes, it's very dangerous. These drugs they're not to be messed with.
When we had the press event with the federal prosecutors, I asked, and they told me right now there's an increase in cocaine from what it was before, and so it's always what's the next, and it's all driven by the profit margin. You know, if now these kids are aware of these pills, they're a little more nervous about these pills, but I mean the obscene profit that these drug cartels and these drug, that's why there's. That's why we're very fortunate that we have these professionals, have this lab equipment, because in other states, Idaho's one of the safest states there is, but it's a constant battle. I mean, we got to continue to invest, we got to continue to make people aware, we got to continue to try and reduce recidivism at our corrections, so that those people that are all going to get, almost all of them are going to get out of prison. So when they get out, they just don't go back, and so there's a total effort to continue to drive this down. But like I said, the profit margin is, and I believe that with what's taken place at the border now, and in fact, I talked to, well, he wasn't president then, I talked to Trump in the interim, and he had, in his trade negotiations with China, he had a strong agreement that China would quit exporting the precursor minerals, precursor compounds to Mexico. And that kind of went away. So as you watch the media about all the negotiations are going place, that's a big part of it, because we can literally significantly reduce it if we just get China to quit exporting the precursor compounds to Mexico. There's so much money in this. I am not overly optimistic. I think somebody else will start doing it. You know, North Korea, fill in the blank. But those are all part of the effort by this country to keep our people safe. So.
All right.
All right.